So this is my latest project, and as I'm going to do the whole thing, the actual machine cabinet and the playfield, I thought I'd do a video of it and bore you all with it. It's fairly shot. I had a bit of an accident with the back glass on it, but all the cabinet needs doing. It's obviously got the usual fade, etc. It's pretty tired. Got some fairly horrible legs. I don't know if you can actually see that, but the cabinet's actually splitting apart. So we've got to fix all of that. So obviously new decals are going to happen. It's all fairly horrible in here. If I can zoom in on that, there's a lot of rust. It's obviously been subjected to damp and that. A load of broken plastics, the usual broken ramps, etc. Volcano's broken as usual. I might have a go at fixing them. I've seen some websites that show you how to do them, and so they don't look too horrendous. And round the back you can see more evidence of the damp there. That's all the fiberboard. The MDF has all swollen up. So we're going to strip it apart, and hopefully it's going to come up rather nice. So these are all the bits I've got to get together so far to restore it. Nice NOS coin door there. Just some general bits and pieces. Some of these actually came with the machine, like the light holders, bulb holders for the back glass. But I've got all new trims for it as I managed to smash it. Rubbers, pop bumpers, all that sort of stuff. Brand new set of ramps there, which obviously I don't show up too well through there. Then there's the new decals for it, ready to go. Then a nice set of shiny new legs, and the thing that's going to set it off, really nice restored and clear coated playfield. So I'm actually going to keep a log of the amount of time this game takes to restore, because I'm never quite sure, but I just do them and then afterwards think, oh, that was a long time. But hopefully I'm going to keep a log this time, and I'll actually get an accurate record of how long it takes me. So let's get on with it. So I'm going to start off by stripping the back box out and removing the playfield. I'm going to take all of these connectors off of the boards and drop them all down through into the cabinet. Now these, I'm still going to write, when I disconnect these plugs, I'm actually going to write the numbers on there. You can see that one there is J504, so I'm just going to write J504 on the side of the plug with a Sharpie. They're difficult to mess up really because they're keyed unless they've been replaced, but it's still good just to have it like that. Just makes it a lot easier when it goes back together. Also, I'm still going to start taking a load of photos now, because just simple things when you're putting it back together, like knowing this black tube goes on the left and the grey one goes on the right. It just, all simple things like that help when you're putting it back together, and you can never have too many photos. My crazy dog here is helping me. We'll see if we get anything done. Right, that was nice and quick then. Right, so all the looms have been passed back down through here, and they're sitting in the bottom of the cabinet. I've pulled the actual playfield one through here, so that when I lift the playfield out, it'll all come out together. So now I'm just going to take off the glass receiving trim, because I find just that little bit extra helps to lift the playfield out and get your hand down behind it. So I'm just going to whip that off, and then we'll lift the playfield out. Okay, even though it's cold, I've taken my jacket off because there's not much room down the back here to get your hand. Let's see how easy we can make this, or difficult we can make this look. Because you have to slide this back to disengage. Let's see if I can get my hand down through here. The Playfield at the rear. Once you've lifted it out like that, it's fine, and it should come out like that. Okay, so that's everything out of it now, Playfield boards, etc. I'm just going to strip out all the bits of, or most of the bits from the inside now. I'm a bit like when I used to have classic cars. As long as it looks nice on the outside, I'm not too worried. As long as it's clean and that on the inside, I'm not too worried about it. Some people go a bit mad painting all the insides of the cabinet, but I'm not one of those people. So I've got to strip everything off. Obviously the side rails have got to come off. You actually do that by getting they've got a self-adhesive tape underneath here, so you have to get a filler knife and put it up once your flipper buttons are out, and you can sort of slice your way along and they'll pull off. And then all the hinges have got to come off so I can spray them. So I'm just going to start stripping all that down. The more I've been taking this machine apart, I think the more it's been abused through its life. Like obviously the transformer's really rusty, but there's only 2 bolts holding it in. The plug at the back that receives the socket has just got this one holding it in here. I don't think it's been very well looked after, to be honest, so it's about time it had a bit of love. I think there's quite a lot of damage to the cabinet that's going to need repairing, which is to be expected, I guess. Okay, so once you remove the bolts in the top and just down here on the bottom of these side rails, use a very thin, flexible scraper like that, and you can just jam it up like that. Just work your way down. Obviously, if you've got a cabinet, you're trying to change these and you've got a cabinet that's already got decent decals on, you can put a bit of felt behind here or something so you don't damage the cabinet, but obviously I'm not so worried about that. And there we go. So that can come off. We can clean all the back of this off, unless these are in reasonable condition. They'll get reused. Then you can just prise off the glass receiving channel like that. And then with a clean up we can get rid of all this crud in here, and then they can go back on as well. Okay, so I've stuck the cabinet in my workshop now out of the way, because I'm actually going to strip the playfield down first, and the reason behind that is some of the parts are going to need to go in a tumbler for a couple of days, so while that's happening I can then do the cabinet. So the most important thing when you're doing this is take loads of photos. It doesn't matter if you took 200 photos, the one you'd want is the angle on the 201st, so you can never have enough. And it's not like back in the 80s when we used to have to pay to develop stuff, is it? So also keep taking them as you strip layers off, so you'll expose posts and stuff. And I mean, I know a lot of stuff on this playfield's wrong, like that post there should be where's it gone? One of them. Can't even see it. There we go. Should be one of them on that side instead of a star post. So a lot of stuff is wrong on this. But then I'm going to change a lot of stuff to be how I want it rather than what was original anyway. So you can shoot me if you're a purist. So yeah, basically loads of photos from both sides. And also when I was stripping the cabinet down, I separate them into bits into different bowls. So these ones are cabinet bolts that are going to want the head spraying on. So that's the spraying one. That's just odds and sods in there. But this is all the bits that are going to go in the polisher. So it just keeps them all separate. So I basically know what's going where afterwards. So I'm going to probably have to spend a good, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours stripping all this down from both sides, and we'll go from there. Okay, so these are all the bits that are going to go in the tumbler. Basically just whack them all in there, pretty simple. Obviously there are lots of other bits, but this only does all the tiny little bits. I'll tell you what, actually I'm going to do then, not in here, put a couple of decent slugs of metal polish. Right. If I put the lid on you won't be able to see it, but and switch it on, and then they basically just roll around for a couple of days, and then hopefully they'll be nice and shiny. That media is getting a bit old actually, but I think I'll get this one last tumble out of it. So come back to that in about 48 hours. Right, here we go. Let's have a look and see what we've got. I've got my, trying to do this one-handed, it's not good. Got my very strong magnet here. It's good for picking everything up out of here. Right, still needs a little bit of a brush off, but a lot shinier. Okay, so I've got pretty much as far as I can get with the Playfield at the moment. Obviously I haven't filmed much of it because it would take about 14 times as long as I kept putting the tools down to get the camera going. But I'm going to move on to the cabinet now. So basically you can see how faded it is if you, hang on, if I put the new artwork against the old there. It's amazing how much they do fade over the years, these things, but hopefully in a home environment they're not in the light so much. So I'm going to start by stripping this cabinet, basically just with the good old heat gun there and a scraper. So just heat it up and scrape it along as you go, and this will all come off and reveal the wood underneath, hopefully with not too much glue staying on there. I've taken these old sliders off the back because, as you can see, they are really worn, and somewhere there I've got some nice new ones to go on, and obviously that will make it easier to sand here because it's all one level across the back, so I can just run the sander straight over the back of that, and that's it. So I'm going to get cracking on that. I'll just leave the camera running just for the beginning so you can get an idea of what it's like to strip off, and then I'll come back once that's all done. Okay, so it's this simple, just very time consuming. Not like I've got anything better to be doing with a couple of hours of my life. Okay, so all the decals are off now. It's actually been a bit of a slog, this one. It's taken about 3 hours to do the cabinet, and then maybe another hour to do the back box, and it's actually left a lot, all this white stuff, which is the glue on there. I don't think you can pick it up here, but I don't know if you can see all these marks here. Well, all the black has come off quite easily because it was generally black up in the top corners. But I think where the light has hit all the lighter colours, it's actually made the glue stick on harder, and it's actually stayed behind. I took some pictures of it, so hopefully they will have come out better than this video. But now we've got to try and get all this horrible glue off, which is a job I hate. It's the horriblest thing to do on the whole of re-decaling a machine. Basically, a lot of people use Goo Gone. I've actually found White Spirit to be quite good. Literally, I'll put a film of that all over this, and it will make this glue go soft, and then you've literally got to get a knife blade and drag it across like that to pull all of this stuff off. It's a bit horrible, a bit hard on the fingers, but it does actually do the job efficiently. So then you've got to do that, get it all off, and then let it dry out properly, and then give it a sand down. So here we go. Right, so now that's the glue's all off of there, you can actually see, if the camera will focus, the pattern where the glue was all on there. I've never seen that as clear as on this machine, but there you go. So now I've got to carry on and do that to the rest of the machine and give this all a good sand over, and then we're ready to router out the holes so we can sink the bolts in. So a few of the bolts that poke through the cabinet and stick through the decals, if we look on my shadow here, for example, I've got these two big bolts here. Well, we don't need to do that anymore. What I'm going to do is this is where they are on the Congo cabinet. I'm actually going to router out a bigger hole so that we can sink these in, fill them over the top, and then the decals can go on without them actually protruding through anymore. So what I've done is I've drawn circles around all the ones that can be routed and sunk in. There's a few on the front, for example these two. The ones where the coin door lock bar was, we can just fill them anyway because they're just holes, but these actually need to have bolts put back in them. So I'm going to route out those holes, and then we can put them back in, sink them, and just fill over the top. If you look on my Sopranos here, if you have a look on a picture of a Sopranos online, I might have one that pulls up. I think it's got actually 3 bolts on a stern. They've actually painted white on the Sopranos, and they actually look horrible poking through there. But obviously now, with them gone, they look a lot smoother. So here we go. Right, I'll switch my hoover on, or dust extractor rather. Take them out and so there we go. They're actually, I've done them reasonably deep because obviously they're quite thick heads, but now they should go in, knock down, and obviously I need a hammer to knock them down. It doesn't really matter what size we do them because they're just going to get filled over, so they don't have to be that accurate. So just got to do that to the other side and all the ones on the side of the back box, and we're away, get ready to fill. Now I was just tying those dodgy corners together that have all split apart. Basically all I've done is drilled some 3mm holes through there. Quite often I use a nail gun just to stabilise, punch a load of nails in, but because this needs pulling together, I'm just putting a load of 70mm nice thin screws that the thread doesn't go all the way up to the top, so basically it will pull it all together. So they're going in from both directions, that way and that way. Obviously you've got to make sure you don't put a screw through here because it will come out in the start button, but just whack them in like that, going both ways next to it, virtually next to each other, and then they will pull the cabinet together, as you can see here. None of this matters because obviously even where that's split out, all this has got to be filled and made smooth later anyway, so that's basically how to pull those corners in. So here's a top tip for all your the bolts you're going to spray. If you just get an old box and just cut across in them with a knife blade, you're going to stick them all in like that and then just spray the heads. So I'm just going to spray all them and the brackets for the side, the back box as well. Okay, so I've gone over probably about 3 or 4 coats of filler now. I don't know if I said earlier, but basically just a 2-part wood filler, obviously a lot harder than normal filler you just mix with water, and it's feeling really smooth now, almost like glass, although it doesn't look it obviously. So now I'm just going over and just with my fingers, if I feel any imperfection on there, I'm just doing a circle around it in pencil, and then I will just go round and fill all those last bits and then give it one final sand. Also I've done bits inside where it's been snagged by the Playfield before, because obviously we'll respray that black as well. Yeah, so basically it's going to do that, give it one last sand, and then we'll be ready to put spray all the black bits on the edges, etc. That's all sanded down nice and smooth now, so I'm going to spray all these edges black. The reason for doing that, so I've done it on the back box here, is when we put the decals on and we cut them back a bit, you'll see a black edge, or you won't see it because it's black, rather than seeing the actual whiter edge of the wood. So it normally takes about 3 or 4 coats to get it nice, maybe a bit more on the back because that's a lot patchier. Right, so I've left the paint to dry for quite a while, sort of 5 or 6 hours, so it's cured properly. Otherwise you'll find if you put the decals on, when you're peeling the bits off along the edge, it will pull the paint with it, so we don't want that. So you just got to let it dry properly. Being in rattle cans, it dries fairly quickly anyway. Last thing I'm going to do to this now is get this very fine, like 240 grade sandpaper, and just give it a light rub over all the way along where I've painted, and just give the whole thing just a really light rub over, just to get any last bumps and imperfections. You can actually really feel the difference between that bit I've just sanded and the bit there I haven't, so it makes it a lot smoother. Then I'm just going to get a like a lint-free cloth, old dishcloth, tea towel there, some white spirit, and just give that whole area a wipe off, because it will get any sort of grease stains off and all the dust, and then we'll be ready to put the decals on. Right then, here we go. Finally time to put these on. Obviously there's a lot of work leading up to this, but as with any decoration, whatever, it's all in the preparation. The decals have actually been sitting up there for a few days, just allowing them to sort of relax and go flat, because obviously they came in a tube. There are actually some, I don't know if that would pick up on there, there are some wrinkles in there, but hopefully they will come out when I roller them. If not, a bit of heat on them will do. I've actually used the wet method of putting them on now. I always used to do them dry, but I had a bad experience doing an Indiana Jones where I had to peel a bit back off and it pulled off the wood with it. So this does allow you to position them a bit better. So what I've done is just cut, obviously this was square, I've just cut that off so it doesn't flop down quite as much. I positioned it so I'm happy with it. But to be honest, these are pretty easy because there's no pattern going around the corners, they're just black. So quite often I would do the end first, because if you had a machine like Indiana Jones here, you have to match the patterns up, so you've got to get this right, and then you can carry on around the side. If you put that on first, then you would have to follow it here, and by the time you got to this side, then the pattern might be way out. But with something that's just like black, we haven't got those problems. So yeah, that's it. So I've positioned it pretty equal all the way round. I'm happy with where it is. Put some felt on there and these really heavy weights, so now when I lift this back like that, it's not going to move. Right, just giving it a last check that I'm happy where it is. Then I'm going to peel this back. Like so. Don't need to do a massive amount to start with, because this will just, once we stick this down, it will lock it into place. That's it, cut that off there. Now this is basically just water and a very small amount of washing up liquid in it. I'm going to absolutely soak it. Doesn't really matter how much of this you put it on, because it will all squash out of the sides. And then using my roller, I mean, people use squeegees, etc. That's fine. So basically this is in the right place because of the weights. So I'm just going to slowly put that down. Squash out any air bubbles going from the centre. If there are any bits that poke up where that creasing I showed you earlier was, that will, when the water dries out behind it, then that will become, the adhesive will become much stickier again, and they should go down. If not, you can just apply a very gentle heat to them and you can get them off that way. So now I'm going to take the weights off. Fold this back the other way. Then remove the rest of this backing and basically go back the other way. Once you wet it, of course. So just repeat the process the other way. And there's no need to panic with this because the water's under there. If you made a mistake, you can actually peel it back for a short amount of time. See, now if I'd have tried to pull that back up without the water over there, it wouldn't have done it. It would have torn the decals and there would have been a load of timber. It would have ripped off the cabinet, stuck to the back of it, which would have made lumps on there. And showed lumps behind it rather. Squeezing the water out. Lovely job. Right, now I'm going to trim the edges off. I've got a knife with a snap off blade. Along the top here, we don't have to be too accurate because obviously the side rail is going to go along there. This is actually quite useful. It's like a safety straight edge, so you can put your fingers behind and not cut yourself, which when you're like me is always useful. Just need to work your way around the edge. And when you get to all the edges that you're going to see, basically fold the decals over the edge and you'll be able to see the edge then. Then step it, the cutting edge or the straight edge a couple of millimetres back, and then you can cut along that and it will expose the black edge that you sprayed. And I'll give you a close-up of that in a minute when I do it. So if you fold that edge along there, I'm doing this a bit upside down, so it's not ideal. This will probably be the worst one of the lot. So cut that there. That's it, and then that comes off there. And you've got a nice black edge there. Obviously you can go around, cut the flipper buttons out. We don't have to cut these holes anymore because we filled them in, obviously, and we buried the nut, the bolts and the bits for the leg bolts. We can cut them out. So that's it. Just carry on, do that. I'll give it another roll to get any more moisture out behind there, but it looks pretty flat. Then set the cabinet on its end, do the end, or the other side first, doesn't really matter. Back box, and then that's it. Okay, so that's all the decals on. Now before it goes back on its legs, obviously I've got to cut out holes for the start button and the shooter rod and that. I'm going to put these one of these leg plates on. Really great things these are. So basically just keep the leg about 1.5 mil off of the actual decal, so you don't get the wrinkling you used to in the old days. So I'm going to screw it in place here, then I'm going to cut round the edge, take it off again, and peel the decals off, and then screw it back in place. And that way then they're not going to lift at all, you know, and wrinkle up, because it won't be catching them. Okay, so I've got the majority of bits and pieces back on, all the coin doors, shooter rods, flipper buttons, all the boards are in. Now comes the time to put the playfield back in, which is basically, as the car manuals always say, replacement is a removal, refitting is a reversal of the removal procedure. So I'm probably going to make this look worse than it actually is, but because I'm on my own, the missus is out, she's my normally my able assistant. So just going to put the cables back over, hopefully in one fell swoop. It's going to go up. As much as that in as I can. There we go. She's back in. As you can see, there's quite a few bits I've still got to do. I've got to put the ramps back on here. I'm still waiting for some plastics and some stand-up targets, etc. But generally it's back together, so at least I can wire all the harness back in, and all the other bits I can just complete in here, and then we should be ready for a switch on, I hope. So we'll see how that goes. Right, so that's everything refitted now. I'm still waiting for a few bits. I'm waiting for my new bit of glass to replace my back glass, and I'm waiting for the decal for the back of this ramp and a few plastics. I've still got broken plastics here and that, and somebody's making me a new plastic for the top of the ramp because that's wrong. But apart from that, pretty pleased with how it's turned out. We'll go for the big switch on now, and let's plug it in. Not nervous at all. Oh, well, that was a good start. Oh, something a bit iffy with the sound there, but it all seems to be in a tract okay. Oh yeah, definitely something wrong with the sound. Cool. That's good news, right. Oh, I think the flips need to be tightened up a bit. Okay, on with the next one.